Hey everybody, it's Ben Cecchini back with the Give and Grow podcast here on the SEL series. I'm super excited to introduce you all to Mary Brey. Mary has been an educator for over 30 years, a social emotional learning coordinator, founder of Mindful Steps, and a whole other bunch of roles that we'll definitely get into. But excited to share her knowledge and wisdom around social emotional learning, and specifically, we're going to dive deep into grief and loss today. So, Mary, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you, Ben, for having me.
Of course, of
Glad to
course.
be
We were
here.
we were joking earlier that I love alliteration. We got Mary on a Monday in March. So here we go, you guys.
All
So
right.
so Mary, we went back and forth a little bit just around your passion. Can you break down or just share with us a little bit more around why you are passionate around like supporting others through grief and
hmm
loss?
Yeah. To back up with just the social and emotional learning piece, I've been an educator for over 30 years, and I was doing some of these things long before social emotional learning was what it was called, and sometimes looked at that, woohoo teacher because she's doing these things with her students before English class or science class or in the middle of science class. And so it's always been part of what I've done and did it pretty naturally. And then now as it's becoming, this is people realize, yeah, this is the thing to do. Uh, in that I experienced several losses in my life in a very short amount of time. At first was a nephew suicide, followed by my dad's death, which was timely and okay, and it just kept piling up over 2 years. And with that, I had stepped away for education from a bit, knowing there was something else to do with my life. I didn't know what, but I knew it had something to do with social emotional learning, supporting students, supporting communities, teachers. And so when I was working through my own grief, I didn't know what to do. So I really, being an educator, I dove into literature and I just started reading, reading, reading. And with that, I was pulling out things that I have done in the past. And what I really went to is when I was supporting my sister when her son died by suicide, I used what I knew as a teacher and just started because she couldn't answer the phone and usually would answer texts. I just started scale from 1 to 10. Where are you?
Mhm.
And she would answer, and maybe she would say more, maybe she wouldn't. And then, being a language arts teacher, a words person, I started doing words, drop a rain to a tsunami. And she would respond usually, but I knew she was safe. I knew she knew I cared. I was living in Mexico. She was in Wisconsin. You know, I knew I needed to be for her there for her daily, and that's
Mhm.
how I knew how to do it, is going back to those tools I used with students. And then I got into pictures, and sometimes they were funny and sometimes they were just sweet. And it was a way to connect with her. And I did that with my niece, her daughter. Um, and then I started using that with others. I had some friends whose husbands were dying or had dementia, and I was using it with little kids and just all over the place. And I just know that I've used scales in the past, and I just found such a natural way to support people and to know it's okay not to be okay.
Mhm.
Wherever you are on the scale today is okay.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of my background and
Yeah.
where I all got started beyond the classroom teacher piece.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I really appreciate you sharing all that with us. I think it really sets the tone and like gives us an idea of your expertise and just why you are passionate on this
Mhm.
and why you've dove deeper there. As you're sharing and one of the reasons why I was excited to see your specialty in grief and passion for supporting others that are grieving is losing both of my parents,
Uh,
and recently actually in August, so about, five
okay.
months ago or so, my mother very abruptly. So I'm
Mm.
going through my own
Yeah,
processes and have been going
sure.
and really
Yeah.
enjoy
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
learning
Yeah.
that comes
Yeah.
through it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
Yeah.
growth that happens with it, and
Yeah.
there's no way to really do it by yourself, I would say. So supporting others through it is so powerful, and the way that we all make it through these challenging times. So
Yeah.
excited to
Yeah.
pick your brain a little bit more around.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry to hear that. And
Yeah.
I guess as these deaths just kept happening, and it got to one summer where I was just like, I'm not okay. And I was reading a book that's it's okay not to be okay. And it's hard to accept that my emotions are everywhere. I'm an adult. I feel like I'm pretty balanced and going through these things. And so grief is so complicated.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
for others to know that whatever you are feeling is okay,
Mhm.
and that was huge, even though I would tell myself that um, it's something I need to keep working on and work with others.
100%.
So,
It's
mhm.
yeah, it can be so complicated. You don't know what you're going to get moment to moment, day to day.
Right,
How can
right.
you
And
learn how to flow with all of that stuff?
right, right. And for kids, they don't know what they're feeling
Mhm.
necessarily. And it's scary. And especially when they're with others who are grieving the same
Mhm.
loss or other losses. And yeah, it's complicated and
Yeah.
the journey.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So kind of diving into
Hmm.
that piece, you brought up kids, and this is obviously a space that we're hoping to share things with parents and teachers and adults just
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
continue to empower kids, whether they're elementary age or middle school. I know you have experience in the middle school, kind of
Yeah.
demographic, and like how can parents support a child or, preteen, teenager through a grieving process?
Mhm. The biggest thing I think is just being there, listening, and not trying to fix. You want
Mhm.
to fix those feelings. And with my sister, I just wanted her, if she read this book, she'd feel better. No,
Mhm.
that's I felt better by reading that book and just
Mhm.
being there and checking in, being
Mhm.
attuned. What are their feelings? And being real with your own feelings.
Mhm.
Being the adult in the room, but yet we're feeling this. We're going through this together. If it is somebody who's
Mhm.
grieving together, um, yeah. And one thing with my check-ins, and I came across, and I'm afraid to say the woman's name because I might just murder it, but I think it's Joan Cacciatore, and she uses the scales like I would. Hers might have been just numbers, but I use pictures and using two scales. One would be, where are you on your emotions? And this could be grief, this could be anything,
Mhm.
but I'm going to use the image of volcanoes. So if you are an exploding volcano, that's okay, those are your emotions. But where are you on your reactions to your emotions? So if that's the grief, and you are in exploding and you're punching things and being harmful to others or whatever, then it's just a way to separate that a little bit into, because you're like, how can I be okay not to be okay? Well, you've got those feelings and those are real. And then there's that whole piece of how to work with those reactions. So that's helped me a lot. um,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, the being
Hmm.
able to separate the two, because then it feels like in between there's like a gap for a choice, right? It's like, oh, I'm
Hmm.
having and
Hmm.
experiencing this emotion. Now I have an awareness of how I've typically reacted to this. And it is that something that you're bringing into when supporting someone else, like that that awareness around the moment of choice between and kind of being able to separate a reaction from a response?
Right, right. It's, once they've noticed what they're feeling, and that's what that check in and then to name it.
Mhm.
And whether it's an emotion wheel, I've got one that, because I've seen some that are pretty complicated, I've seen some that are pretty basic for little kids, and I've created one that's more um, it dives into a few different emotions. So it's not just I'm mad, angry, sad. You can go a little bit further. And once you are able to name that, and then you can, okay, I need to really feel this. And
Mm.
then it's the nurture. And so, then it's like, okay, this is what I'm feeling. What do I need? Do I need to take 3 deep breaths? Do I need to walk away? Do I need to get more sleep? Do I need to talk to somebody? And so that's kind of, I go through those four ends
Mm.
to kind of get from that explosion to, and maybe I'm going to be that exploding volcano many days in a row, but my reactions hopefully can be a
Mhm.
little more towards the middle or a dormant volcano.
Yeah. Oh, I
And of
love.
course, all over the place. And they need to know that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I just wanted to pause and have you just name kind of in order those four ends that you mentioned again?
Sure, sure. And I've seen the notice it, name it, nurture it. And I've put in the nest in there so it's to notice your emotions. Where are you feeling it? What are you feeling? Um,
Mhm.
and right away, you might not know what that is. And a lot of times kids don't, a lot of times adults don't, I don't. And
Right.
then it's to name it. Okay, what is it? Am I mad? Or maybe I'm frustrated. Maybe I'm disappointed.
Mhm.
And then kind of sit with the nest. It's like, okay,
Uh,
I need to feel this, and be okay with it. This is how I feel. This is real. It's so I'm one who just like, no, I don't feel that way. I don't feel that way.
yes.
But just feel it and then nurture it. What is it that I need? And,
Mhm.
and some of that's going to overlap,
Yeah.
but yeah. So,
Those are like all the pieces, and
hmm
going through my own process and doing so mindfully, like those seem to
hmm
really work. I'll just
hmm
speak, from my experience that I'm going through
yeah.
right now. Like they really seem to work. Sitting the nest also being like
hmm
a powerful part of that. Can you just like speak a little bit more to maybe your experience and some of the people that you've worked with experience when you're just able to nest and sit and feel these
Yeah.
things that are happening.
Yeah, and I think that's the hardest and most uncomfortable.
Mhm.
For me, it's like, oh, I got to feel this, or um, but I think it's just to, to to get the message across that it is truly okay. And and just recently I reached out to a friend and I was pretty upset about something, and but it's bigger in the world. It's not something I can control, but I can control me. And
Mhm.
I just needed to realize it's okay for me to feel this way. And
Mhm.
that was actually when I started to think back to my scale with the volcano. And it's a matter of, I'm going to feel this, but how am I reacting?
Mhm.
Swearing and whatever is not the answer,
Mhm.
but to sit here and go, yep, this is what I feel, and this is
Mhm.
okay. So, and I've
Yeah.
seen kids do that. And I had a student just told me, I never knew it was okay to feel this way. You just think that,
Mhm.
oh, you're supposed to be happy or whatever, and but yeah, it's so important for students to know that
A hundred
whatever they're
percent.
feeling is okay. And yeah.
That's a big thing that we do in like our assemblies with Give and Grow,
hmm
and we do a lot virtually, so there's not a lot of like communication back and forth, but
Yeah.
we have kids
Yeah.
raising their hand. Like, how
Sure.
many of you think that feeling mad is like bad to feel? And like so
Yeah.
many hands go up in the air,
Yeah.
and that's why that message that you're saying, like
hmm
anything 1 to 10,
Yeah.
volcano to
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
pond, is
Yeah.
like
Right.
totally
Right.
okay.
Yeah.
Totally
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. I was
And
talking to my friend. Sorry.
no, please go.
My friend the other day who was a school counselor for elementary, and she uses to woohoo, and it's as simple as
Uh-huh.
that. And when she sees her kids in the hall, you could do that. And if you make those connections, like I've got scales with cars, and you could, you see the kid in the hallway, and it's like, you a Ferrari or are you an old junker or something? And it takes
Hmm.
2 seconds to have that connection.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that like really makes it easy, especially for teachers, but parents as well. Parents can be like super busy. You mentioned
hmm
being there, obviously during certain challenging times. You got to make time,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
on the everyday to
Uh,
day when things are going crazy, what I'm hearing from you is there are simple and effective ways to just let that kid, whether it's yours or somebody else's, know that you're there and you care,
Yeah.
and whether
Yeah.
it's you have a car next to you, or you're able to just create that little what's the term I'm looking for, like little structure, or little like
hmm
exchange that makes it easy for especially a younger kid to just identify.
Right, right. I suggest to parents to have something on the refrigerator, whether it's an emotion chart, whether it's a scale, and with magnets. And you can wake up in the morning and put where you are. You come home from school and it's like you're in the watch out category. Okay, don't talk to me for 10 minutes. And maybe the parent needs their time. It's like, need 10 minutes, but those little communication uh,
Hmm.
tricks, techniques, patterns, and to make it a practice.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
especially if you have a school where they are doing SEL, and for parents to guardians to know what the school is doing and try to parallel that, that's
Hmm.
huge. Yeah.
Yeah. That was actually one of my questions that I
Hmm.
had for you. Like, how, in your experience, how has it been like effective for a parent to learn about the social emotional learning that's happening at the school and like be able to, work in parallel with that?
Yeah, I think it's really important to educate the parents, and that can be difficult because oftentimes when you would have a parent workshop session, usually you get the parents who are the ones who will be doing this anyway or
Hmm.
implement it like this, but it's the ones who can't be there, or they don't have the time, the means, or it's just not part of their comfort zone. And so
Hmm.
it is, as educators, the more we can get parents involved, whatever that
Hmm.
is, if it's through quick little videos sending home. um, I would try to incorporate when I would do something with students, like, okay, take the scale home, show it to your parents, ask them. Or we did this
Mm.
box breathing today. Go home, see if somebody at home will do that with you. Teach it to your dog, or try to get that
Right.
into the house, uh,
Hmm.
so you've got that connection.
Yeah. Oh, I
And
love and
then the parents
appreciate
can
that.
can model and do that as well as they're learning with the students, because a lot of this, you say mindfulness or meditation, that can be really scary or
Hmm.
even off-putting for some, and it's just doesn't need to be.
Yeah, yeah. I really appreciate how you're making all of this approachable. I mean, it makes sense being like an educator and, like having all those
Mhm.
little tips and tricks, which is why I love having conversations with, especially people that have been around doing this for, 30 years.
For a
Like you
while.
have so much time and
Hmm.
experience. And especially for a young parent that's just starting off, I don't have any kids, but we're heading in that
Hmm.
direction,
Okay.
and like being able to learn from people like you that have this experience is just so helpful, and we get to lean on those resources, and the schools are another one of those resources, especially
Hmm.
now with social emotional learning coordinators and specialists and
Right.
people that this is their job to help support
Hmm.
students in this way. I
Hmm.
I love that you have like, you know just those little resources, the magnet thing on the fridge, or like, I'm excited to be
Yeah.
able to hopefully share some of those with the people that are tuning in and on the blog that will have coinciding
Sure,
with this as
sure.
well. So what is like, there's this question that I had around like, and this idea around the one thing. There's sometimes in situations where there's just one thing that can make everything else like easier or unnecessary. And like when it comes to, let's kind of bring it back to grief for a moment.
Hmm.
Um, what's the one thing that us adults can do that makes everything else like easier or unnecessary when supporting a child?
I guess it kind of goes back to what I've said, just to be attuned to them, to
Mhm.
what are they feeling, and
Mhm.
and you might not know what to do with that, but just to let them know that you're acknowledging that. And if they're having a really good day, hey, that check in why, what is
Mhm.
making this a good day,
Mhm.
and just to kind of um, read the room,
Yeah.
and the more they can do that, and not to be afraid to ask for help,
Mhm.
whether if you're in a bigger community and there's some great grief bereavement centers for kids, the school counselors, use your
Mhm.
resources. I guess
Mhm.
that's the one thing to know. You can't, you're not going to fix it, and you shouldn't fix it, but just
Right.
be there, just to be there and hold that space. And yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. I realize as I'm asking that, like we kind of hit on that
Yeah,
already,
but
but
that's all right,
it's
because
good
it
to go
is,
back on it.
it's so simple, but it's
Mhm.
not,
Right.
because you just,
Mhm.
and I know we are a grief adverse society. We don't talk about it.
Mhm.
Um, we don't know how to talk about it, many people, and so we want to fill space. I'm not okay with quiet time. I
Right.
want to, let's talk.
Mhm.
But if you are with someone who's grieving, and just sit there, and
Mhm.
and watch out for all those platitudes. I know how you feel. You don't know how you feel.
Mhm.
Well, at least, um, you know, so trying there's some things to try not to do.
Mhm.
And so just sitting there with them is priceless.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
it's crucial.
definitely, thinking about the experiences you talked about, like the fighting or the punching, the behaviors that might happen,
Hmm.
right? Like I know there's like doers out there. That's how I experienced my father's passing, was like,
Hmm.
all right,
Okay.
I'm
Oh,
gonna get to work and I'm
yeah.
gonna grind
Hmm.
to avoid sitting with it and feeling with it,
Sure. Yeah.
and then there's the let's talk, and
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think that all these can be like healthy ways, and there needs to be that nesting. There needs to
Yeah,
be that
yeah,
sitting with it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's one thing I had learned too, and I definitely see it with the different ways people grieve, and if you're doing, a lot of times if you're, I see this with my sister, creating crafts and woodworking and things, everything that just is an memorial to her son in different
Mhm.
ways. And so as you're doing, you are working through grief, and maybe some of
Mhm.
it's avoidance, but you're continuing those bonds in
Mhm.
whatever way that might be. And so,
Mhm.
as you talked about the one thing, but I think as time goes on with whether it's parents, guardians, teachers, the more we can learn the little things about grief, the better that we can learn
Mhm.
that there's different styles of grieving, and there's no one right way to
Mhm.
grieve, and grief is like a snowflake, and all those things, so kids know too that it's
Mhm.
okay. And I use metaphors a lot.
Mhm.
Like the wave crashing over you, and well, the volcano, of course, but things like that, so kids can say, okay, I could be standing in the playground and I'm fine. And all of a sudden, nobody does anything. A wave crashes over me and I'm crying
Right.
because, maybe you weren't even realizing you're thinking about your dad or whatever. So
Mhm.
that's something I use a lot too, is the use of metaphors in grief.
Yeah, I love that one that you just described. I really This is why I love these conversations, and I hope people are like enjoying this too, because it's those little nuggets from experienced people that like, okay, we can take all these with us today, here and
Hmm.
now, and be able to support
Yeah.
somebody, and support ourselves as well. Um, what are some like healthy habits, routines, practices, um, whether it's somebody going through grief, whether for a kid, or,
Hmm.
just potentially something for resiliency, or mental health,
Yeah.
that you
Uh,
kind of
yeah.
suggest?
Just the basics, eat, eat well, move. And I think one thing, especially maybe early in grief, is celebrate those little wins. If you're
Mhm.
having a hard time getting out of bed, and then you can get out of bed and brush your teeth and brush your hair at the same time. Hey, that's great. You didn't do that
Mhm.
yesterday, so
Mhm.
of course there's the big things of get the sleep, da da da. But when you are just especially so new in grief and fresh, and
Mhm.
celebrate those little wins and
Yeah.
do what you can, and you get out of bed and you make one, you can send one text, great, and you can't for 2 days. So I guess
Mhm.
that's one thing, is just, be kind to yourself,
Yeah. I feel that's
give
very.
yourself grace.
Yeah, that right there.
Hmm.
We've
Hmm.
been my mother's passing has turned into weekly Zooms with my siblings who are all over the
Okay.
Northeast. I'm down
Okay.
in Costa Rica, and I was
Hmm.
telling them, I was like, I think I'm feeling depression for the first time. Like,
Yeah.
it's not there like
Yeah.
all the time, but it comes in waves, right?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
my brother is he was there when my dad passed away from a heart attack, so he's been feeling that
Mm.
for a long time. um
Sure.
and he was just so experienced in it. He's like, hey, some days you're not going to be able to do anything,
Hmm.
and that's okay.
Hmm.
Give yourself that time
Yeah.
and space. And
Yeah.
then, especially for like kind of like an overachiever, somebody, and I think a lot of us American, Americans can relate to this, is we're taught to grind, and if you're not, you're
Yeah.
lazy,
Yeah. Right.
and so like
Right.
that can be the hardest part of just slowing
Yeah.
down and taking a break.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I feel like everything you just shared is really validating around like those small wins, taking it
Hmm.
slow, giving
Yeah.
yourself grace,
Yeah.
those are all
Yeah.
skills, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And also giving yourself grace to enjoy yourself and to smile for the first time. And this might be more so with the
Mhm.
with adults and they're dealing with a loss and all of a sudden, oh, I just smiled, I just laughed. I remember the first day I woke up and my nephew was not the first thing I thought about after his
Mhm.
suicide. And that was
Mhm.
months, but it's like,
Mhm.
ooh, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I think that's important too, that it's okay to have fun and both things can be true. And
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. There's one last question that I have for you
Mhm.
today, Mary,
Sure.
and it's around that parent, I can only imagine because I'm not a parent yet,
Hmm.
but being able to, how is it that I want to ask this? Like knowing that you might be experiencing the loss with your kid, right? A
Hmm.
grandfather, a
Hmm.
grandmother,
Hmm.
or a husband and a father, whatever it is. Like, what advice do you have for a parent to like remind them that it's okay for them not to be at the top of their parenting game during this
Hmm.
time, and how that vulnerability might even be supportive of a child's grieving process?
Yeah. Oh, that's a really good question. Um, I'm not sure if this is really answering it that way, but I think what I found is that I'm not a parent either, but the only other person who can understand what it's like to lose a child is another parent. And you're unfortunately in this horrible club together. And so if there is a support system, whether it's on Facebook, on in a community, and to then know that, oh, you did this with your kids today. Okay, yeah, I did that yesterday. It's and to be able to give
Hmm.
yourself that grace and to um, you know, to be able to grieve together with your child or grandchild. And one thing that I've realized with grief so much is that they're called like secondary losses. Um, so maybe it's income if somebody dies, or you can't live in the same place, or and so there's all
Hmm.
these other places. So it is so much for parents,
Hmm.
and so I think the more that they can reach out to the school counselors, to
Hmm.
the community, find a support group if you can.
Yeah.
Maybe you're going to be ready at some time to then support others, but I think just to find somebody in that same situation.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's powerful. Yeah, we can't do it alone, you know.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I've learned the most from my sister is that I can be there as much as I want, but I'll never know.
Hmm.
What it is like. And so
Yeah.
she has a community of other parents who have
Hmm.
lost, and it's military, so she's connected with other military families
Uh-huh.
and who've so yeah, that would be the big thing is don't do it alone.
Hmm.
And whatever works for the person. If they're one who needs to read and learn more things, great. A lot of time grief won't let you read. People they've got this um grief brain, which is a real thing and it can be
Hmm.
something. So maybe it's podcasts, maybe
Hmm.
it's journaling, drawing, whatever. But just the
Hmm.
more the person can take care of themselves too, um, as they parent. And one thing that I volunteered at three different grief camps. And one of them, the parents are allowed to come as the adult part of the camp and then the kids. And any of those type of resources or
Hmm.
opportunities are amazing.
Yeah.
I would definitely
Wow.
recommend that as well.
Yeah, and thank you for dropping in those resources throughout the
Mhm.
day. I'll be sure to like share those, in the descriptions and in the blog and things like that, so people can just like
Mhm.
easily access, even just those general ideas of a grief camp.
Mhm.
I didn't even know that
Mhm.
was a thing. So I hope
Yeah.
that
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
I
Yeah.
hope
And I've
that.
seen three different styles, three different things, and they're all amazing in their own way. And yeah, that is something if you can get kids and the one went up to teenagers and
Mhm.
because it's tough.
Yeah, yeah. This has been a really powerful conversation, Mary. I,
Mm.
I really appreciate your time
Well,
and
thank
just
you, Ben.
sharing your heart, your passion, and all the tips and tricks and reminders that you dropped in here today. Mary, is there any place where it's easiest to like get in touch with you and if somebody were wanting to follow up?
Sure. I'm not super active on social media, but
Mhm.
my email is mary.bry at mindfulsteps123.com. And I sell resources on TPT, and my store there is Mindful Steps 123. And so
Awesome.
some of the things that I've talked about are in there. Some I'm working on. I'm working on the 4N to get a resource in there with that. So that's coming soon.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, we'll be
Um,
able to share that
all
link as well
right.
to your
Great.
TPT. Thank you
Great. Thank
again,
you. All
Mary. So
right.
appreciate it. And thanks to everybody for tuning in. See you on the next one.
Thanks, Ben.